I was in kindergarten when I got my first report card. There's a transition for you. I was so excited. The teacher handed me an envelope and said, take this home to your parents. And there were check mark boxes next to a variety of statements about my progress in reading and math and cooperation and participate, you know, kindergarten, right? My mom opened the manila envelope and looked at the card, and they were all marked excellent, because of course it's kindergarten, right? And many of them had notes written beside them. They were in cursive, and so my mother was reading them to me one by one. I was so proud, and then I watched her get down to one, and she paused for a moment, and I saw her take a deep breath, and she read something like, now she kept this report card so that she could tell me about it years later over and over again. She read it. It was something like, despite moving her to various places around the room, Tamara still enjoys talking to her neighbors too much. Wow. Well, it was really clear now for me why I was having to change my seat every time I went to kindergarten class. It hadn't sunk in until then. But although this was not a very effective tool to keep me quiet, what the teacher didn't realize is that moving me around helped me befriend the entire classroom, one neighbor at a time. It was like kindergarten networking 101. Now, David Isaacs, who is one of the founders of this process called World Cafe, which is a model that we're going to be using later on this afternoon at the leadership retreat. And by the way, I did not invite you in the announcements. If we have room left to come to the leadership retreat, it is from 2 to 8 today at Congregation B'nai Emunah. All of our leadership have already registered, and we've got room for more, and I would love to have your voices included in this. What we're talking about is how to unite the church, this church with one church with many expressions. So that's what we're looking at. So anyway, David Isaacs, the founder, one of the founders of this process that we're going to use, said that our work is to remember the world, that we don't need to create it from scratch. Now, in the World Cafe model that we're going to be using, space is created for intimate conversations with a few people at a time, and then you change places like I did when I was in kindergarten. It's like up, and everybody moves around. It's kind of, no musical chairs, though, but still, everybody moves but one person, until the entire room is cross-pollinated with a deepening of ideas. It is a magnificent process. They've used it for peace negotiations. It's a really neat thing. And something bigger by the end, bigger than all of us or any of us combined, will likely just emerge. Now, there was something about that little me in kindergarten who was leading with curiosity rather than judgment or fear, that understood that all of my neighbors were worth talking to. Now, I may have learned very early how to talk, but it took a lot longer to learn how to listen well. Margaret Wheatley, who's president of the Burkina Institute, says that she thinks we've forgotten as well. She thinks that our work is to remember the world, and she thinks that we've forgotten. She writes, "From what I observe in many places, it appears that our memory of how to work together in healthy and productive ways has been nearly extinguished by the creeping complexity of group work, by facilitation techniques, obscure analytic process, and our own exhaustion." She says, people are more polarized, more overwhelmed, more impatient, more easily disappointed in others, and more withdrawn than ever before. She says, we're frustrated by the increasing number of problems that confront us and our difficulty to resolve even the most simple ones. And no sane person wants to participate in yet another meeting or get involved in another problem-solving process. Perhaps, she goes on to say. The most pernicious consequence of this memory loss is our growing belief that humans are a difficult, self-serving species, and that we cannot trust each other. As this negative belief grows stronger, we remove ourselves and focus only on the work that we can do on our own. We pay attention to the work that's just in front of us and lose appreciation for the whole system, for the whole elephant, as Reverend Gerald Davis was talking about. Isolated, we lose courage and capacity. Our work loses meaning, and we end up with fatigue and loneliness. Does this sound familiar? Maybe it's your work week. That's possible. Or your volunteer work. Or maybe for some of you, it even reminds you of your extended family. Paralyzed by the number of ineffective conversations, paralyzed by the conflict, we give up on talking about what is most important to us altogether. And some even dig their heels in with the way that it should be and with what they are not doing, whoever they is. There's this old story about two clerics arguing about how to do God's work. They're both really good men, very earnest men with good intentions and valuable gifts to offer. They'd been arguing for a very long time about which way was the right way to do God's work. When in the spirit of collaboration, one cleric finally says to the other, "You and I see things differently, and that's okay. We don't need to agree. Tell you what, you do God's work your way, and I'll do God's work his way." Or the updated version, you do God's work your way, and I'll do God's work her way, or God's way. It's that very kind of conflict that leads many of us not to speak up at all. We're worried we might be written off or classified as one of those kind of people. Well, this generation did not invent shutting down when the stakes are high in a conversation. I want to talk to you a little bit this morning about Simon Peter. Simon Peter in the Christian scriptures. See, Peter was one of the first disciples called out to follow Jesus with his brother Andrew. He was a fisherman by trade, and he left all that he knew and loved to go on this new journey where the road was unclear and his path was uncertain. Soon after he became a disciple, it's reported that Jesus healed Peter's mother-in-law from a debilitating fever. It was Peter who, on that foggy night in the water, was invited by Jesus to step off the boat and into the sea, only to be sunk by his own doubt and rescued by Jesus. It was Peter who, when asked by Jesus, "Who do you say I am?" named Jesus as the Son of a living God. It was Peter who asks for clarification when Jesus tells the parable of the blind leading the blind. It was Peter who goes up onto a mountaintop with Jesus and hears directly from God that he should listen to Jesus. It was Peter who cannot believe that the man who he has given up everything for would be killed. It is Peter who Jesus calls a stumbling block, with his mind too occupied with the things of men, and who repeatedly falls asleep on watch while Jesus goes off to pray. This is a complicated relationship and a complex man, Peter.